Hi there guys, it's Eileen and I'm going to do another witchy check-in because developments and new insights, which is like some of that is pretty cool. So if you're into this whole therapeutic stuff that I'm into on my channel most of the time, there may be you just hear me out, okay? I'm still rather confused and surprised at how things are going at the moment. Because it looks like my methods that I have been applying and things that I've been looking for and trying to apply for myself to dig my way out of my, situation that I was in earlier, they're actually working. So to me it's rather a big deal. Also, it's a very different weather at the moment. There was probably going to be lighting issues going in and out like that because there's a lot of wind and it's from the north and it's a completely different type of weather from what we've had over the past couple of weeks. It was sunny like this. It's still sunny, but it's 10 degrees at least colder. So there's also clouds and I don't know what it's going to do really. So when it gets too dark for you to see me, I will stop talking, okay? Anyway, the big deal for me at the moment is that what's happened is I've had a bit of an issue with my new neighbors over yonder, who seem to have a problem. I mean, they have every right to have a problem with my trees over there, except that they're not really my trees, and a lot of how things have been going from their side, it might have gone easier and gentler and more mature and grown-up style, and it hadn't really. It can be still also 10 times worse than it actually is. So I am not complaining, at least not at this moment, not anymore, because I've got plenty of reasons not to complain. But there's been a bit of an issue. They like to have their household. She likes to have her house and her garden, all clean and neat, and she hates it when things interfere in her space, apparently, which I can relate to. And my wisteria that's in my Acer tree all the way up, it should have been trimmed, it should have been checked and pruned and all that stuff years ago, but we didn't really know how to deal with it. We'd had no experience with that type of plants before, and so on and so forth. So plenty of reasons why that didn't happen. Stupid. Today is, by the way, Monday 11, and the first away from lockdown measures are taking effect today in the Netherlands. So, and in France as well, what I read is there's different approaches. Every country has got their own approaches and their own ways of doing things, and it's all very confusing and difficult. But I have got a hairdresser appointment for Tuesday next, not tomorrow, but the other one. And things are looking up. It's definitely starting to look up, which is another reason why I hated that I had such a hard time with my neighbors, okay, over this tree business and the fact that my wisteria is a crazy ass plant that is it looks like it's intending to take over the whole neighborhood, and it's pretty when it's flowering, but it's a bit wild and it's a bit too much. And at the moment it's flowering and it's dropping little petals and stuff all over the place. In my garden as well, in my yard, in my back alley, there's stuff all over. And so all that is very sane and very normal, and we needed to get that seen to anyway, which is not something I tend to think of, and now I have to. It's fine. Okay, I don't hate being reminded by people that I have to, sometimes do things. it's not, I don't hate being reminded that I have to do something. I don't like it, maybe, but I wasn't really in a horrible resistance mode, I think. However, there's other things going on. I don't want to talk about them because, God, Lord forbid that they see this video. Then, I'm not against any of what's happening over there. I don't know. I think that they're in a situation, they're a bit younger than us, quite a bit, I think. And they're in a situation that's hard for them. And they just moved in here and it's been COVID-19 time and it's crazy for everybody. So let's just leave it at that, okay? Only I had a bit of a communication issue with her personally, where I felt the way she spoke to me was incredibly confrontational, and I had not given any cause for that. I do not deserve to be treated this way by somebody who is actually little more than a total stranger. If anybody treats me like that. Last week, okay, at the supermarket, there was this guy who's like in age, he could have been my kid. And I had a little question about some sponges that I bought, about the price. And he went to look at the price, etc. And he talked to the cashier and not to me. He refused to look at me. And I stood outside with my bag of shoppings and smoked out of the ears like, this is unacceptable. I'm old enough to be your mother. You gotta look at me when you talk to. He was talking to me and he wasn't looking. He was like going like, and he's a head taller than me. So I went back in and I, ferreted around where's that guy at? And I found him quickly enough. And I said to him, look, sorry for bothering you again, but I think it's really unacceptable that when I have a question that you are supposed to answer and you don't even look at me. Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't mean to, blah. And yes, I was at the cashier, was serving other people. I said, yes, but I'm also a client. I'm a very loyal customer at your shop. I've been one for 6 years or more, and I deserve to be related to. I don't accept this. And so he took it and he accepted it and he said, yes, okay, I'm sorry. So, fine. Points for him, points for me. So that's how I like to do things. It is not a problem when people have problems and life's too much. I totally get that. Oh boy, don't I? Oh God, the sun. The sun is blazing on my floor and into my brain. Right there. With her, my neighbor, I have not had yet the opportunity to talk and exchange whatever it is, other than in this context. It looks like she's, I don't know. I have ideas about her, but I'm not going to share them here. That's silly. That would really be silly, I think. The thing is, I was really upset because of the way she behaved towards me. I felt like I had done nothing to warrant the way she is acting towards me. She treated me in a way that was so negative and so distrustful, and so she was threatening me. And I thought that was, really, at this point, I say, well, there's reasons for that, obviously, and I am not the reason, because I haven't done any of these things. That I haven't, yelled at her or tried to, be authoritarian towards her or any of it. I've only ever asked for, what do you think, blah, 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 that type of thing. I came back home from the little talk that I had with her about this tree, about, trying to get it pruned and organized and get that wisteria out of the way from them. I was only trying to help, And she basically barked at me. I came home and I walked up and down in my kitchen here, which is like 2 meters, crying. I was in the throes of despair. And looking back, I assume that there was something going on with the phase of the moon or what have you. I don't know. I must have had some other extra reason for me to feel so badly triggered. I mean, you can only giggle in this kind of, because, oh my God. My whole belly was aching. Everything was hurting, and it was like she'd actually physically assaulted me, which is a thing. People assault each other vibrationally, right? It's something that happens. I don't think that it happened in this particular case, though. She was only being herself, and to me, there's a trigger there because she reminds me of my mom. Yeah, obviously. Also, I've been doing a lot of writing. A lot of it is about the past, about behavior patterns, about how powerless we can feel. That is a really weird color. And now it has changed back again. I'm kind of hoping for the weird color to show up on YouTube because everything suddenly went yellow and orange for no reason because lighting's the same. In parentheses, I have been doing a lot of revisiting of old forms of powerlessness for my piece that I am writing. So it's coming along really well. I've got lots of pages with lots of illustrations and lots of other stuff. Mwah! Excellent. But I've been doing a lot of revisiting and a lot of, going back, trying to be authentic, trying to be fair to myself, to other people. It's not easy. And this is just another continuation of the same story, of the same, how do you deal with this kind of thing? And I was so upset, and I wasn't even scared of her, of my neighbor, personally, that much, I think. I was just so upset that she was basically blaming me for everything that's wrong in her life. That's what it felt like. I have been on the receiving end of that type of blame a bit too much, even though I've learned heaps from that by now. That was making me miserable. That was basically the trigger. It's my fault that she has to deal with this horrible tree, and she doesn't care about the tree. She just wants all the trees to be gone, and so on and so forth. And she was angry. Now the interesting thing, which I think is extraordinarily positive, see, there it is again, the yellow, weird yellowness. I was upset for quite a while. I had a slice of bread and a cup of tea that husband made me. I've managed to stop crying and having, general meltdown over this. I calmed down enough to, I don't know what I did. I think I went to the computer and I wrote another piece for the thing over here. And then I went back down again. I had found another person, because that was part of my powerlessness scenario in that moment, was that I didn't have access directly to somebody who could trim a tree like that. It's not like something you do every day. You have to get a professional to do that. And so I had a brainwave. We actually have a person for the rest of the garden for trimming bushes and things like that, that we can call, and who comes over if we ask him. And he's not exactly 100% super reliable. Sometimes he's been a bit unreliable in the past, let me put it that way. I'm not so fond of him. He tends to not look at me when he talks to me, things like that, which is same. And I certainly wasn't confident that he would feel comfortable trimming that huge big ass tree of mine. And all the wisteria and all that is just a bit much, you know. And it's not the right season to trim a tree because it's horrible actually to do it right now, but I don't have a choice, so I'm gonna just have to leave it at that. And then I had a brainwave. I went and looked up tree care companies in the neighborhood, and I found one that had a reliable and sort of reassuring looking website, and sent the page on to husband, and he's called them, and he's in by now. He's looking for when they can come and take care of this business for us. So a practical measure has been put into motion, and it will all be resolved on the practical side, you know. So that's a huge relief. And we sat and watched movies, and we had a bit of red wine that we had left over. That was probably not such a good idea, because when you're too emotional, it just gets messy. And it wasn't that messy, but it was not such a good idea, basically, to have that wine. It was good wine. Went to bed. I had loads more tea and water, and I, sort of seeing to hydration, so that was kind of okay. And I was in bed, and I was thinking, okay, so I've been sort of, from watching movies, I've been taken away from my hyper emotional state, and I get into these movies and things, and then I go to bed, everything's dark and quiet, and I return to myself again. And I realized after 10 minutes or so, all day long, in different stages of expression or awareness, I have been very emotional. Not at one point have I been disassociating from my emotions. And I just went like, that's pretty cool, because that used to be very different for me. Sip of tea. Lipton's yellow label with half a slice of lemon in. A huge big deal. Going out to spend 300 bloody euros in the fanciest restaurant, if they were open. Okay, 1st of June, that I can find, kind of celebration, is how I feel about not having to disassociate anymore. Or dissociate, what's the word? Because I can deal. Nowadays, this is me. And whether I wear this stuff or whatever I use, I've had an aspirin because of a slight tendency to a headache, because I didn't sleep all that well. I can do me without crumbling to pieces, and which is what it used to be like. I'm going to describe all this in a lot of detail, so if this is you, you're warned. Please, that's why I make my channel, okay? This is why I am here. I used to, from day one, from the day I was born, until very recently. I turned 54 in August this year. I think until a year or so ago, whenever I was called out, made to be responsible for a problem that was larger, than the thing at hand, which is what people do. When I was blamed, when I am blamed, always, I used to get into this state, and sometimes it would last for several days even, or it would surface irrespective of somebody calling me out or blaming me. There would be a sudden phase where at the end I started describing it 10 years ago or so, when I started basically on my my journey of figuring out how this all works. And the reason why I started on a journey to figure this all out for myself is that it was unbearable. And there were, I suppose that you could say that there were levels. There was like a very low grade level of dissociation that I used to encounter sometimes on my own also, like a low grade kind of like a mood that comes from being too tired, not having had your vitamins or your fruit for a while, or not having had enough fresh air for a while, exercise and things like that. In those cases, when there was no real necessity for me to be stressed out about somebody else in particular, when it was just me, I used to go for a bike ride. Often. A couple of times. I think that back in those days, so 10 years ago and before that, that was my only remedy that I had for that type of situation. And I also used to apply the same remedy whenever I had been in conflict with somebody, when I had been in a situation where they blamed me for something or other, where a part of the scenario is, it was fair and honest. Only the manner where it was delivered brought in, to me, to my sensitivity, it brings in all the rest of what is wrong with that person's life, because they're just too upset with me for the fact that I did this thing or forgot to do this other thing, which warrants it warrants that is talked about and that something should be done about it. This has happened to me quite a number of times. And I, because of my past, because of growing up with a mother who had a truckload of problems from, trauma and past history, that's my trigger. That's what happens, is I get driven in a corner where I'm held responsible for everything, not just for this particular thing that needed to be done. The person in question does not intend this to happen 99 out of 100 times, I am sure. I think they don't, or at least they're not aware of it. They're not consciously planning my my demise by behaving in this way. It's frustration, and it's just the way life is, and it's just the way people are. And it's very often women. Very often. Their bad relationship with their mother, I get to pay for. Ever and on and on and on and on. Each time. So, I had a thread here somewhere, I don't remember it. I realized that, oh yes, I was in the middle of describing what that feels like. That's where I was. Because I was talking about other people, and I should really be talking about me here. Low grade levels, go for a bike ride. Also, sequels to being blamed by people for things that I had not done or partly done or not done well enough or whatever it was. My only particular special solution for those kind of things was to go for at least a half an hour bike ride and clear my system and get my blood sugar levels to where they were supposed to be and things like that. And nothing else, no other solutions really. And then there were the phases which were worse than low grade, where most times I think I ended up in those when I was actually under a lot of pressure from somebody. That somebody could also have been my husband, because my husband was, until 3 years ago, carrying around ectopic tissue in his stomach, and he was not half the man he is today in terms of humanity and compassion and communication and all the good virtues, you know. He tried, and I believed in him, but he didn't have the he just didn't have the stomach for it. Just that. And then when they had done the operation and he healed properly, for the first time I got to see who this man is that I believe in, you know, who he really is and what he can be. And so that's great, and we're talking about literature the whole time nowadays, because he's into poetry and I'm into that thing, and it's just going great. We're having lots of fun with that. But there were all sorts of moments where I have to also link this whole healing process that I embarked upon to, at the beginning of that, rests what I've called this soul retrieval experience, that I still cannot really interpret in any other way than as a soul retrieval story. You know, it's really weird the way that went. That was instrumental in the whole tale. Before that, all I had were separate bits of consciousness inside me that weren't linked. I was aware, I think around 12 years ago or so, I started being aware, so that's around 2006, 7, thereabouts. Not easy times, certainly not. I started being aware in myself of when I felt that way, also in the low grade version, that I felt like a train with a locomotive and cars behind it, but they're not linked together. So no matter what I put in the locomotive or how I make the locomotive try to work, nothing's happening. We are not moving. We are not going anywhere. There is no change. Looking back from now to that image and to the way that felt and the way I looked at it back then, I think I felt like that all the time. So I was in like a very low grade state of what you might call depression. If it had been emotional and angry, you would have called it depression. But there wasn't really that. I had rather a lot of self-control, where I normally managed to not express negative things because that was unpopular with the crowd, always. Anybody, you know, they always had to rely on me, and I had to be this happy, cheerful, you know, very well-known story. Tea. Describing it the way it felt, it shows in particular the frustration I felt about not being able to do anything about my situation. I couldn't move. I couldn't make my little train move. I couldn't organize a change. I couldn't organize a process at that point where we would actually, at the end of the day, have a different situation from the one at the beginning. I felt like I had no future. I had no hope. I had no plans for anything. I could only sit around and wait for things to happen. I could do short-term things very easily. I can execute orders quite easily most of the time. Plan work. I had brains enough to plan work and to see to things and to do a gazillion things. Could work really hard, but I had no inner power. None at all. And very few times there were actually people who challenged me about that, which I think is really hurtful thing to do. If you see that in a person, that's not the way to go about that. But maybe they didn't know what they were doing, really. I don't remember exactly who they were and when that happened, but that has happened a few times. No, mostly not in a very antagonistic or confrontational way, so much. So the way it felt when everything, when my whole train was kind of collapsing and I was just seeing bits and pieces of myself and wheels turning idly without, gears didn't, it's like a gearbox, but all the little wheels, the cog wheels, are turning idle. Like that. That's more of an image about my person back then than the train is really. The result is the same. And I still do not really have any other explanation for what happened to me than this whole soul retrieval story, which is about that it's possible in shamanism. There's people who work with this type of stuff out there, plenty more these days. Their idea is that it is possible for a person to lose a significant emotional part of themselves, whether in a past life or due to trauma in this life. Both can happen. There are different approaches for either of them. I have done a past life regression on YouTube in 2012, where I encountered an obvious, very obvious, significant to me other person who registered for me as this is a person that belongs to me. And because it was presented to me as a soul retrieval about a past life, I have accepted it as such. I still do. There was a lot of emotional power in that part of myself. But it took me another 3 years before I realized that I needed to be reunited, because I didn't have a shaman with me who looked after me and saw to that integration part. I had to do it all myself. And I had to figure out very slowly, I'm afraid, that her and me, since we were two sides of the same coin, so to speak, we really needed to connect properly. And in the end, I asked somebody, like an astral guide or somebody like that, to help me to create that link for me. And from that day on, everything's been different. And I have also, it is like, I could also really envisage easily enough that it is both true, that there was actually a soul loss happening to me from the moment I was born, because of the way my parents behaved, because of the way they behaved towards each other, the hard times. And I didn't know how to deal with any of it. I got blamed for things that I couldn't possibly be responsible for at 3 years old, things like that. A lot of frustration got dumped on my plate that I had nothing to do with whatsoever. And I may well have suffered my historical, so to speak, soul loss then. And maybe only then. And that my experience from encountering this woman during the soul regression session was a story that I told my own brain to get reacquainted with that part of myself. It's a possibility. The other possibility is a lot more exciting to me, that she was actually a 14th century person who lived then, and there were reasons for the way she died. Sorry. I don't talk so much at the moment, so hence slight hoarseness. It's a lot more believable to me that because of the nature of her personality that was presented to me, the way the things I recognize in her, and things that have been elements in my own life up to that point, up to that soul retrieval in 2012. I used to already have a lot of not so easy to explain personality traits and characteristics and things that suddenly start to make a lot more sense if I accept that there is actually a past life soul retrieval there. I have past life videos on my channel as well. If you're interested, playlist is right there. So I am still, I think the jury is still out, as they say, on because how are you ever going to prove anything unless you find a place where that's supposed to have happened, what you saw in your regression, and you actually get to go to that place and rediscover it and see all your images and your visions confirmed by that visit, right? That's a possibility. I haven't had that possibility yet. I've had to do this, once removed, so to speak. But the being reunited in 2015, that was then 3 years later, with that old part of myself, and she does feel like an old part. She also feels, she's an important part of my document over here, because she's an important part of who I am now, of everything I do now. And she is weirdly more than one person. She is one person, but she carries with her a lot of experience, a ton of experience that is not hers in that particular life either. So I get a very deep, profound, very satisfying to me sense of deep time and experience from even just thinking about her and the way her life used to be when she was, doing what she did. And so, talking about how this is going on this end now, again, I had to make this contact with her, integrate as much as possible the fact that she was a lot of my missing parts, my central piece, like the axis that links the cogwheels together so the whole thing operates. I don't know, there's probably a lot of mechanisms out there that work like that, where there's a central rod with wheels, on it that see to transmission and things. If the central rod is missing, there's no transmission, right? There's no power being put into effect like that. That is how I felt. And it was such a nasty feeling to be so ineffective, to be so without any power ever. Oh God, and I'm I'm hard put to put into words how miserable that could feel sometimes. And especially when I was attacked or challenged or felt confronted by people making demands of me that I should, right now, instantly deliver this, whatever it was that they wanted. Sorry. That's what they did sometimes. Not her, other them. Or that way, Demanding people, making demands. Ugh. And I just didn't feel able to. I tried to execute all the outside appearances of the things that were wanted. If you ask me to put those 3 boxes over there, then I will go and put the boxes over there. It's not hard. So I tried to really painstakingly always do what they asked with me. And I wasn't really stupid, so a lot of times I could also, think ahead, figure out what was a good idea and I learned a lot during the process. So at some point or other, I figured out that, okay, so those boxes have got to be over there and not over here, because otherwise it's going to be hell to pay, you know, that kind of thing. All very normal. The soul retrieval didn't immediately have, it had an immediate effect that I could feel. And it was weird. It was like exactly like having a second person inside me, with me, who could help me in all sorts of ways, who I see now from, you know, having been in this life like this nowadays since, you know, 4 or 5 years already. Come September, it will be 5 years since 2015. Oh, hallelujah. 5 years that I have spent on different types of therapeutic work. I have spent quite a lot of time doing Teal Swan's completion process, where you integrate, you pay attention to your own emotions, basically, dealing with triggers, dealing with bad memories over and over and over again, if that's how it has to be. A lot of the credit of how I feel nowadays goes to that work, certainly. I mean, Teal Swan published it, and she's had these experiences herself, and she's written about them. But you still have to do it yourself. You cannot, it's not like she's going to do it for you. You have to take the time, make it happen. You know, I have recently also, you know, gotten involved with Kundalini work, which is another whole story, and Tumo, which is another separate department of Kundalini or Shakti work. And all that is helping. Tumo is definitely helping to clear away a lot of the remaining questions and opinions and, you know, viewpoints that I still carry around with me, especially on a cellular level. That's where Tumo is hitting me. So that's great. So there have been, I think those were the main tools that I applied. I have written a journal. I've kept a journal at least a couple of times a week is my normal regime. For that, I have used a lot of astrology to sort of map out how people react, how I myself react, how my parents used to react to things. I've actually learned quite a number of things about my mother from interacting with my dad for the first time, because they divorced when I was a real little kid. Recently in the autumn of 2019. So because my parents had almost the same birth date, so they had an astrological birth chart that was really very similar in many respects, and they were also very different, and they were also very much fighting with each other, and that's always been very very hard for me to understand. How can you have all these things that are the same and still you know, want each other to be dead the whole time? So those are a couple of my tools. I've used tarot. Is more like a very big source of joy. Tarot and oracle. I used my Tarot de Marseille, which it's just a little teeny tiny cheapo deck that I bought. Actually, it was 20 euros, so it's not like extremely cheap. Who are my friends in this? So just like you, Jennifer, with your allies, except I just used the tarot, and I went for. I wasn't aware of your video at that time, or maybe subliminally because I'd seen it in my feed. But I wanted to have like a mind, body, soul spread of 3 cards, 3-card pull that represented also 3 friends of mine in this whole process. So everything to do with my neighbors, but also with my past and all the rest of the integration process. In particular, the fact that I don't fragment anymore, because I have the central axis is still there. It's reliable no matter what happens, no matter how. I got for the mind position, I got the Queen of Wands, like so. I wonder whether that will focus eventually. Eep. Then for the body position, the Temperance card. For the soul position, the Magician, which is a card that keeps coming up for me over and over again. So I was happy with those, all three of those. Also, Queen of Wands is always cool in my book anyway. Temperance is always cool in my book. I felt like it's extremely good advice for me to keep an eye out for temperance in my own, because I am not a temperate person, and a lot of the dissociation was nothing but lack of experience dealing with my own emotions, dealing with fear, with sadness, and with loneliness. Those three. I had no clue how to do that. And it turns out that I cannot use tools from the outside, like pretty crystals and what have you, all the rest of it, to replace my own inner core. And it is because I have come into contact and know my inner core. I can rely on the inner core to be there, to keep the cogs turning. And then I survive, and I feel fear, and I feel anger, and I feel anxiety, and I feel sad. I feel their emotions, all of it, but I can handle it. I am made in this way. I am a very emotional person. It's fine. I have a brain that can help me, manage things. I'm fine, because I don't dissociate anymore. So to celebrate that, I am making this video. I am, for Christ's sake, hoping that you find this inspiring and or helpful. There's hope for us yet. I don't think everybody has got to go back to the 14th century to, reel in the bits of yourself. But wherever you find the bits of yourself, that is the feeling that you have to trust. This is me. I belong to this. Come and, stick with that. Because that's the only, without that, I don't think it's ever gonna, you can't medicate your way out of this type of stuff. So that's 50 minutes almost. I'm gonna leave you at this. Thank you so much for coming along on this endless talk. And I'll be back soon enough. Okay? Ciao for now. Thank you. Bless you.